Welcome to our February 8th board meeting. We welcome you here, and we'd like to get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would stand and join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Ms. Calanda.
Mr. Applebaum?
Here.
Mrs. Castillo? Here. Mrs. Feldman? Here. Mr. Major?
Present.
Mrs. Mogerman?
Here.
Dr. Ciartino? Mr. Jacob?
Here. We have some special recognitions tonight that we're very excited about. Heading up our fine arts, and we have a wonderful person, Sandy Collins, who recently was given the honor as one of the administrators of the year in that area. We recognized her last time for that, but we want to recognize her again for that. And we're pleased to recognize an exceptional group of young people, our Parkway students, who earned all-state honors at the All-State Festival concert at the Missouri Music Educators Association Conference, which was held in late January. I'm going to invite Sandy Collins, our coordinator of fine arts, if she would come to the podium while we recognize these students. I'll have a few comments to introduce. Well, let's just go ahead, Ms. Cassandra.
Good evening, President Jacob, members of the Board of Education, Dr. Marty, Mrs. Calanda, and ladies and gentlemen. It is with great honor that I again introduce our All-State students for this year, 28 extremely talented and dedicated Parkway High School musicians who have achieved the distinction of having been selected to perform in the 2012 Missouri All-State Choir, Band, or Orchestra. Auditions for these performing positions were serious and competitive. Prior selection for local ensembles was necessary, and auditions at the next level had to be performed perfectly with the technical skill and understanding that made them stand out from hundreds of other students across the state that were vying for the same seats. Now, I could talk all evening about the skills of these students, and you know I would. But I thought, you know, as a picture is worth 100 words, I think perhaps a concert or music would show a little bit of their talents. So what you see on our side, please direct your attention to Winifred Kroc, and the group that you see in front of you is made up of all-state students only. So we're going to have a very calming, lovely, beautiful piece of music to help set the night. Winifred Kroc.
On behalf of all the faculty that teach these students, these are three of the four high schools represented. We have our string students, quite all of them, and Chris Lang is going to perform on the oboe this evening. My regrets and apologies to our wonderful vocal and choral musicians who weren't able to accommodate you this evening, perhaps another time, and our other band students as well. We'd like to present for you this evening Gabriel's Oboe by
These students certainly represented our district well. We wanted to feature our oboist. It's so unusual to have such a high-skilled oboist. And I would like to also mention Christopher, our oboist, was also selected and will be going in March to play with the National American String Teachers Association Orchestra, along with, I believe we had Ben Park, Benjamin, yes, and also Matthew Sprague. And could you raise your hand? So that's just an extra honor. They play in a lot of places, but thank you, Christopher. And that was Gabriel Zobo. These successful students have demonstrated the very highest level of musical competency, and they have made a personal commitment to artistic excellence. I would like to thank their music teachers, all of you here, for motivating, nurturing, and guiding these students into skilled and accomplished musicians. Parents, raise your hand if you're here. Parents, thank you also. Thank you. For your continued support along the way. I know you're proud of your students, and we all are, of our 2012 All-State Music students, so congratulations to all. I would now like to introduce our students by name and school and ask that their principals and teachers join us at the podium to be recognized by our Parkway Board of Education. We'll start with Central High, and I wonder if Principal Tim McCarthy is present. He would come down and join us. And also, we'll start with Winifred Kroc, and I don't know if Susan Hampton is here, but please come down. And Doug Hoover also for our band director. So we'll call our students down, and you can bring your violin or instrument with you or leave it there. Let's start with Sarah Kim, violin, Central All-State Orchestra member from Central High. Okay. Daniel McDonald, violin. He is a senior, and it's his third year at All-State. So, Daniel McDonald. Adam McDonald, I believe they might be brothers, a violinist, a junior, and his third year as well. Matthew Sprague, violin, a junior violinist, and he was at All-State. This was his second year. So, Matthew. A senior, Douglas Tang, violin, second year at All-State. Douglas Tang. Sean Byrne, a viola player, junior, and 3 years at All-State. This is his third year. Congratulations. And Melinda Lai, and that would be cello, sophomore player, and her second year. So she's got 2 more to go. Melinda. Andrew Larson, we have a senior cellist, 3 years, I guess, and he is a senior. Okay, so Andrew. Maggie Madsen could not be with us this evening. I think she had a prior commitment, but she's a junior and 3 years, so Maggie will get her certificate. Maggie is here? I'm so sorry. I thought they said you weren't here. Maggie. 3 years. All kinds of surprises. Okay, Ben Park, senior cellist. And Ben Park, 3 years. And none other than Christopher Wang, oboist, a senior, 4 years at All-State, 4 years. May I also say, Christopher also plays a very fine cello, so multiply talented. And Dylan Adams, we couldn't be prouder of our trumpet player, senior from Central High. So Dylan, is he here with us? He might be coming from another location. Maybe not. And this concludes our Central High students. Congratulations. If you could stand for a photo. Would you join them for a photo? Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, North High Principal Dr. Ginny Marquardt, please come up and let's recognize some of our students, please. And Ken Rapini is our orchestra director there. Brian Reeves and Emily Matthew, our choir directors, if they would please join us. What a handsome group. Okay, North High. Some of our students could not join us tonight. They're so involved. Some were in Webster at a orchestra. Others are practicing for a musical. So we'll see who's here tonight. Andrew Stock, I think Mr. Rapini, did you say was not here? That's correct. He's a junior, 2 years. We'll make sure he gets a certificate. And Ryan Wahidi, and a freshman, first year on the bass. Okay. All-state choir from North High. We have Caitlin Mays, I think, was involved elsewhere tonight, correct? She was a senior, and she's been 2 years in the group. And Benjamin Weinstock, a junior, tenor and first year. So congratulations, Benjamin. Josh Mayan, tenor, alternate. We're happy that you're here, and it's a senior. It's like the standby. You're in the wings, something goes wrong, you're next. So you have to still learn all the parts. Okay. Jack Catalanato, did I mispronounce it terribly? Okay, Jack Tenor, a tenor alternate, and we're happy to have him here from North. Brian G., bass player, alternate, and a senior from North. And is Brian here? Congratulations, North High School. Let's hear it again for the North students. Could you join us for a picture over this way, please? Congratulations, everybody. Thanks, teachers. All right, let's call up South High. And do we have Gary Mazzola with us today? And we may or may not have some of our students with us, but Jonathan Owen, please come up. And I think we do have. We had some conflicts we had to resolve. Okay. All right, so we had for our all-state choir, Madison Elmore, senior. Come on up, Madison. Dan Myers, a bass, senior and second year. That's wonderful. Good for you. And thank you, South High. And so if you would join over here for a picture, that would be wonderful. Our teachers and principal over this way. Thank you. Okay. West High and Dr. Jeremy Mitchell, if you are here, we'd love to have you come down. Now, they are in dress rehearsals for their musical, and you don't miss dress rehearsals. So I don't think Ed Sandheinrich or our teachers could be here. They're all involved. So I'll go through the names, and if anybody's here, fine. Otherwise, you know they're rehearsing. Okay, we have Raj Malhotra, violin, sophomore. Good. Thank you. And Rue, cello, sophomore. Anthony Sue, violin, sophomore. I think maybe he's at the rehearsal. Yeah? Okay. And Michael Sue, must be a brother, a senior, 4 years at Allstate. Michael is in rehearsal. Emily Spieler, viola. Is Emily here? She's a freshman, only freshman on the whole team. We hope to see you again, Emily, 3 more times. That's a hard order. Okay, Allstate, and we have Emily, the choir. We have Emily Barbour, is that correct? A senior, 2 years in Allstate, and she may be singing in the musical. And Henry Hubbard, a tenor, senior, 2 years, and again, I think our singers are practicing on the stage at West. So these conclude our recognitions, and please join your students West for a little photo. And thank you very much for recognizing these wonderful, talented students. Thank you.
Well, Sandy, thank you again. You never disappoint us. I think it'd be wonderful if we could start every board meeting with that kind of music. Well, it actually touched me very deeply, and I don't know if some of you felt some tears, but I certainly did, and was so proud of these young people who presented music that just had to go to the very core of your being. Just wonderful. And I know how proud we are of them and how wonderful it was for them at State, and they love to perform. If they have room for a Teletubby and an old tuba player, I'd be happy to join them.
Mr. Jacob, I just want to say I had the opportunity, along with Kathy Blackmore, to be at Tantara to hear 3 groups, and it was just a marvelous experience. Our Central Orchestra and band, and our Central High School Orchestra, and Sandy was there. Of course, a lot of the music personnel. It was my buttons were bursting to be so proud to be Representative Parkway. I'm not very musical personally, but it was I agree. It was very touching, and our kids just did a marvelous job. And so I just want to make sure all the individuals deserve recognition, but our groups and the people that work with them to prepare for that was marvelous.
I might add that it is very unusual to have 3 groups from the same school district to be performing as ensembles. So you have the All-State kids that perform with others from around the state. Then you have ensembles that are selected because they're high excellence. This year we had our Central High Orchestra, directed by Winfred Crump and Susan Hampton. We had 2 groups from this middle school, our Central Middle 8th grade band, directed by Paul Holson and Jeff Pottinger, and we also had Joe Bradley's Honors Orchestra, and they were fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's usually not aired, but I'm glad that you brought it up. We should recognize it. Thank you.
Well, thank you again. We'll take a short break. I know we have an exciting evening ahead, but some of you may have other things you want to do, and we appreciate all of you parents and people who were here to recognize these young people. We'll take a short 3 or 4 minute break.
Once in my life, I've got someone who needs me, someone I've needed so long. For once, unafraid, I can go where life leads me, and somehow I know touch what my heart used to dream of long before I knew someone warm like you could make my dreams come true. For once in my life, I won't let sorrow hurt me, not like it's hurt me before. For once I have someone I know won't desert me. I'm not alone anymore. For once I can say this is mine, you can't take it. Long as I know I've got love, I can make it. For once in my life, I got someone who needs me. At least for once
place in my heart it will tell you. I'm afraid I'm alone. Won't somebody please hold me, release me, show me the meaning of mercy, let me loose. I'm blending, I'm blurring, I'm bleeding into the scenery. Loving someone else is always so much easier. But I hold myself hostage in the mirror.
Welcome back. We're back in session and don't have anybody to sing for us now, so we'll go to 5.0, citizen statements. When I'll call your name, and if you'll come to the podium, please say your name and your address so we make sure that we have the right information so we can respond to you. And you'll have 3 minutes. We'd like to start with Molly Gulino.
Address is 1859 Oxborough Court, Chesterfield, Missouri 63017. Can I go ahead and start?
Yes, please.
I'm going to read this because, go ahead, 3 minutes.
3 minutes,
That's
yeah.
fine. Thank you. I am here tonight as a concerned Parkway parent with 2 elementary-age daughters and an incoming kindergartner. I understand that the vote before the board tonight is not one filled with easy decisions. I also understand that cuts to the operating budget must be made if we are to avoid a larger financial crisis in the years to come. But I do not understand why these cuts must affect our reading recovery and math intervention programs. 5 years ago, the taxpayers agreed to increase our taxes in order to fund Prop R because our district was behind in math, science, and reading. In the 5 years since the passage of Prop R, our test scores have increased largely in part to the success of the reading recovery and math intervention program. Yet now you stand before us and tell us that the very programs that have made our children successful are going to be restructured. That even though we are still paying taxes to fund math and reading assistance programs, you're going to allocate that money elsewhere or in a different manner. You have told us that your plan is to increase classroom teachers' capacity for teaching and focus on developing the teachers so they can essentially work with less support. This may sound good in theory, but it cannot possibly work in the real world. Each child who receives support from a specialist succeeds because of the small group setting and the fact that the specialist can allow the child to work at their own pace. The classroom teacher, no matter how outstanding, simply does not or will not have the time to allow a child who is struggling with subject content work at their own pace while challenging the rest of the class. No amount of professional development can replace the expertise of a specialist or make time stand still. I appreciate the response from the board concerning the math intervention program following last week's meeting at Henry Elementary. The fact that you found a way to increase the projected number of math specialists from 12 to 18 lets me know that you are listening to us. But with the amount of uncertainty that still remains regarding the fine points of restructuring the programs, I implore you, the board, to table the portion of the proposed budget cuts that concern reading recovery and math intervention until there is a better defined plan. The only people who will truly lose if you go forward with such a non-specific plan are our children. I'm in possession of approximately 190 signatures on paper. I also have 52 online signatures from an online petition, from concerned taxpayers, voters, and parents from the district. We are asking you to thoughtfully consider our concerns before you cast your vote on this issue. I don't know if you, can I bring these to you or
If you
send them?
give it to,
Okay.
give it to Ms. Calanda, and she'll make sure we get it. We will respond to you in writing. Thank you, Mrs. Galino, for your comments. Next, we have Bill Otto.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. My name is Bill Otto, and I am a candidate for the newly formed district, 70th District for the Missouri House of Representatives. This district will encompass the northern portion of your school district as well as a segment to the west in Chesterfield. It's a rather odd district, honestly. It's the largest now in the metropolitan area. Begins in Hazelwood, goes south through Bridgeton, western portion of Bridgeton, down Highway 270 to Maryland, the area of Maryland Heights, comes down to Chesterfield and takes in a wedge of Chesterfield down to Chesterfield Mall, and then goes across the river into St. Charles County. It takes, it's 2 counties, 5 municipal governments, 5 fire districts, and 4 school districts. It will take quite a bit of work to be able to juggle the needs for the entire district. For myself, I am a retired air traffic controller, 31 years on the job, includes 20 years at Lambert and 7 years in the United States Navy. I also lived in Bridgeton for a number of years, was on city council there, as well as a number of other community boards. My sons went to Pattonville High School, where, of course, I participated in their education process there as well. I would like to tell you, as a potential representative, that I believe it is incumbent upon me to understand the needs of the individual needs of all the school districts, of the various districts within this large House district, as well as the common interest between all of the school districts. I do not believe that the state of Missouri can continue to cut to prosperity. We have to find additional funds to finance the educational process in the state of Missouri, period. I believe there are revenue streams that have yet to be tapped fully that could be dedicated to education in the state of Missouri. And I believe, and I am completely open to finding new streams of revenue, which means taxes if necessary, to make sure that the state of Missouri does not continue on its downward spiral in both its education system and the amount of money that they're putting toward education in Missouri. I would look forward to a productive relationship with this board, and hope that if I'm successful, that we can help provide you with the things that are necessary for you to continue your fine work here. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Otto, and we look forward to responding to you in writing. Next on our list of citizen statements is Mr. Peter Larson.
Peter Larson, Parkway graduate, Parkway parent, Parkway educator, 226 Fawn Meadows, Baldwin, Missouri, 63011. Members of the board, administrators, fellow teachers here tonight, and members of the community, I am here today to personally invite you to the 4th and final Parkway Digital Film Festival. The celebration of student storytelling will take place on April 26th at the Purser Center located at Logan College off Shetler Road. Over the past 4 years, this event has given thousands of students the opportunity to be recognized for their creative use of multimedia in the classroom. This night gives all of us a chance to truly see what confident, curious, and capable students can produce when given the opportunity to share their talents with an authentic audience in a meaningful way. For some students, this is a life-changing event. For all students involved, it is a night they never forget. It is a proud night for Parkway and has brought regional as well as national attention to this district due to its uniqueness and scale. We have created the model for which others wish to follow. To fully comprehend the wonder of this evening, you must attend and watch the students walk the red carpet and cheer for each other's films as they grace the silver screen. For our students not involved in athletics and other performing arts, this is their chance, their night, to experience the elation that comes from being recognized for an outstanding effort. Much like my team's work with students and teachers, the full impact of the Parkway Digital Film Festival cannot be measured, it must be experienced. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will respond to you in writing too. And finally, our citizen statement is from Jean Sander.
My name is Jean Sander, 12121 Fox Point Drive, Maryland Heights, Missouri, 63043. I'm a Parkway parent, and I also am president of the Parkway North PTO. Last fall, numerous people addressed this Board of Education about the time changes, about making things earlier for high school students. And this board basically ignored many of the comments and didn't even table it to discuss it. I'm wanting you to revisit that. Again, we look at the opportunity for high school students, and tonight is probably a perfect example. We had so many music students honored. Many of those music students start their day at 6:15 in the morning, okay? And those are high school kids. And people say that activities should not take precedence over education. Music is education. Many of the students also are involved in other morning activities like mock trials, speech and debate. They have science clubs, medical clubs. And Parkway affords this opportunity to our students to extend their educational day. Unlike so many districts, in so many districts, you have to choose between music and sports or mock trial, those types of things. Parkway has always afforded the opportunity for those students to do those things. And I understand that starting school at 7:35 is not fun for anyone, okay? But I will say this, that a middle school parent has more control over when their kid goes to bed. My son goes to bed when he can. If he could go to bed at 10 o'clock, he would go to bed at 10 o'clock. But he can't because he does activities and he also has classwork to do, frequently till midnight. Also at the high school level, we have students who have jobs. There are kids that work at Deerbrook's till 11 or 12 o'clock at night. Then they come home and they have homework. And maybe in the morning they have marching band practice. So I think that this is something that this board needs to address again. And I just beg you to at least look at it, talk about it, talk to the community, talk to the high school kids. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Sander, and we'll respond to you in writing. Thank you again. 6.0, call for executive session. There is none. 7.0, approval of agenda for February 28, 2012. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second. The motion carries 6-0. I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries 6-0. 8.0 resolutions. We have the following resolutions that we'd like to adopt. President's Day, February 20th. Music in Our Schools Month, the month of March. National Middle Level Education Month, the month of March. National Nutrition Month and National School Breakfast Week, March 5th through the 9th. National Professional Social Workers Month, the month of March. Women's Rights Movement Month, March. Youth Art Month, March. NEA's Read Across America, Dr. Seuss's birthday, March 2nd. School Social Workers Week, March 4th through the 10th. And finally, School Principals Day, March 7th. May I have a motion and a second to adopt these resolutions?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries 6-0. 9.0 communications. I'd like to give you an update on the board filing for education. There will be an election for 2 seats on this board that will take place on Tuesday, April 3rd. There are 3 candidates who have filed for the 2 available positions on the board, and the people have filed in this order, and if they would stand so that we can all see who these candidates are. They're all here tonight. Beth Feldman, she currently holds a seat. Helen Castile, and finally Kim Applebaum. We appreciate these people with their willingness to do this, and I hope that you'll be able to select the candidate that you're in favor of and vote for that person on April 3rd. Next, 9.3, liaison reports. Are there any liaison reports from the board? Mr. Major.
Mr. President, I just unfortunately couldn't attend the event, but I did want to mention that Tom Applebaum did help organize the parade 2 weeks ago now. week and a half ago. And in Navy parlance, bravo Zulu, Tom, that means well done.
It was pretty neat to see the city of St. Louis be the first one in the nation to welcome home these heroes who have done what they've done for us, and we appreciate it. It was a little bit nippy out there if you were in the shade, but if you got a spot in the sun, it was pretty nice. It was a great parade.
Yeah, I did promise 70 and sunny, so I think my reputation as a meteorologist is shot. But I want to say thanks to all the students and the teachers who involved the students in making personalized signs for welcoming veterans home. That was really, really gratifying to see that out there.
Okay. Any other?
Well, first of all, I want to say, in piggybacking on all of this with Tom, that I was out of state at the time, but the saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, let me tell you, what happens in Parkway does not stay in Parkway. It made it all the way to California, and some of the postings and everything that I read, 100% positive as to what Tom and his group did. So I just want to let everyone know. Thank you, Tom. On Friday, February 3rd, attended Carmen Trails Bring Your Parent to School Day, and the students were awarded certificates for being capable, confident, and curious. And also, the kindergarten class there at Carmen, the whole class had accomplished their goals, so everyone in that kindergarten class got an award. Also, we had observed juggling that was taught by the PE teacher. I believe it's Kathy Wessler. Please correct me if I'm incorrect, pronounce the name incorrectly. And one of the students that was juggling, he had 3 apples and he was twirling the hula hoop, and in between juggling he also took a bite of the apple as he was juggling. So I had asked Kathy Wessler if, you know, I could learn something like that, and she looked at me and kind of winked. So, but anyway, I was thinking I would love to learn how to juggle. Also, while we were there, 5th grade chorus, under the direction of Graham Allen, provided a sneak preview of the Parkway Elementary All-District Choirs performance at the Purser Center at Logan College on the 4th. And also in attendance, Dr. Marty, and I'm trying to think, Bonnie Maxey was there, Dr. Maxey. And a big thank you to all the music teachers once again. They do a fabulous job for Parkway and for our students, and of course a great thank you to all the students. They were just fabulous. Mr. Renard Brown's North by Northeast performers were super. And of course Sandy Collins, thanks again to you, our fine arts chief, who was named Outstanding Administrator of the Year at the Missouri State Thespian Conference last January, which we'd already discussed. And also an apology to a 5th grader at Carmen Trails. My personal apology, just because I did meet her afterwards. Her name did not make the program. So a special hello to Miss Abby Pratt, 5th grade at Carmen Trails. And on Tuesday, February 7th, we had a discussion at Mason Ridge with the PTO. Was happy to meet the people there at Mason Ridge. We had an informative 2-way discussion with parents and teachers on the current restructuring. Also, I would like to read one of the letters that many of us received from the students at Sorrento Springs. And the letters were in relation to the, I guess it was is it National School Boards Week?
Yes.
Is it? Okay. So just briefly, these students took the time to write us, so I would like to give back and just read one of the letters that we got. Dear Mrs. Castile, thank you for everything you have given us to make learning fun and interesting. Thank you for all the time and money you put into all of the schools to give us education. We are all grateful for the equipment like the computers and the laptops. Thank you for the balls and jump ropes, etc. For PE. And thank you for the heart monitor watches. Everybody loves them, and they are a fun way to stay active. Thank you for everything. And it's sincerely Lily Quinn. So Lily Quinn, thank you.
Beautiful writing.
It is.
Beautiful writing.
Beautiful.
Better
Just-
than...
Yeah. Very good.
Thank you. Mrs. Mogerman, do you have some?
I didn't bring the letter with me, but the one, we all got, what, about 10 letters, something like that?
I only got 2.
Oh. Oops. I would say. But the one that struck me, the little girl thanked us for giving them computers to use, and they do work most of the time, she said. Anyway, let's see. 2 weeks ago, Dr. Marty and I attended the Cooperating School District Strategic Planning Steering Committee that we've been drafted to be on, and they're making some headway with their strategic plan. Dr. Marty got recruited to work in a subgroup because of his expertise, and I think our next meeting is February 20-something.
Yes, I'm not, yes.
So,
Yes, something
so
26,
we're coming along. They're trying to get this done probably by March, I think.
Yes.
So they're moving along on that. This morning, Beth and Chris and I and Dr. Marty, right, attended the PTO leadership group. Always good discussion there, and we had a presentation from Liz Morrison on the PLCs. And second time I've seen her presentation, and I look forward to seeing it again. She'll be making it on Monday at the, help me, Project Parkway Town Hall?
No,
What
just
do they call
meeting.
it? Meeting? Okay, at North High School. So I hope some of you will attend that. Several of us have been attending coffees around the district. It's been great discussion and back and forth, and so we'd like to thank those schools that have been hosting us. And I think that's all I had, Chris.
All right, thank you very much.
I was corresponding with the teacher, Mrs. Novelli from Sorrento, whose students wrote the letters to us. And I don't know that everybody knows this, but she said her students had a little lesson on how a school district operates. Somehow they got the idea that we pay for the items they have at school. She corrected many, explaining in greater detail that we vote and approve the school budget and where Parkway spends the money. I thought that was very appropriate for tonight's discussion. Anyway, in addition to this morning's PTO leadership, which I think was one of the best attended leadership meetings that I've ever been to in all my years going, we went to government relations not too long ago, and we had, last Friday we hosted the Rockwood Board and all the legislators that represent, the Missouri legislators that represent Rockwood and Parkway residents. We hosted them in our administration building for a luncheon where the legislators talked to us about their ideas, and we got a chance a little bit one-on-one to talk to them about the Turner fix and some budget issues. And we had a presentation from a man from Pattonville about the foundation formula. I think we all learned a lot. And at that meeting, Diana Stewart distributed our new Parkway legislative platform that has come out of the government relations meetings. So thanks, Diana, for your work on that. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to read briefly a little letter from Ariana, who was brief and to the point. She says, thank you for approving the money so Sorrento Springs can buy more books. I especially love the Warrior books. Also, thank you for the computers and laptops. Thank you for giving your time to do all of the things for us. It must sometimes give you a headache. And she has some pretty good insight. Thank you for approving the money so we could buy the smart boards, and thank you for everything that you do for us. So thank you, Ariana. Very cute and a nice social studies lesson for them there. And pretty good penmanship, too. I skipped one thing here, the calendar of, are there any other liaison reports? Okay. 9.02 calendar of meetings. The next meeting of the Board of Education is scheduled for Wednesday, March 14th, 2012, here at the Central Middle School, starting at 7:30 p.m. 10.0 action items. We have action items 10.01 through 10.28. I'd like to ask for a motion and a second to approve those.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any that need to be pulled to action or closed?
Yes.
Okay.
10.21, please.
Any others? All right, 10.21 will be pulled for discussion, for action. And all in favor of a motion and a second to approve 10.01 through 10.26, excluding 10.21? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So the motion carries 6-0. 10.21, purchase of 5 vehicles.
It's really more of a statement than a question. I had a question from a parent about why during these times of budget cuts, why are we buying 5 new vehicles? And I just asked right before the meeting, so I have not had a chance to get back to this parent, but hopefully she's tuned in. And I was told that they're replacement vehicles, replacing 14-year-old vehicles on our regular replacement schedule, and these are the trucks that deliver the food to the schools. So just wanted to let everybody know that. Thanks.
All right. And a motion and a second then to approve 10.21.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. 11.0, 11.01, approval of superintendent's budget recommendations for the calendar year 2012-13. I'd like to call on Dr. Keith Marty and Mark Stockwell.
Yes, and Mark is going to, for the sake of our audience and the board, just review the budget process. First, I guess the budget problem or problems we've encountered looking ahead, then the process, and then briefly the recommendations. And then I'll, after Mark's presentation, just talk about some changes we're making to the initial January recommendations. So Mark will start off the discussion.
Good evening. Good evening. Tonight we'll be requesting your approval of recommendations intended to reduce the 2012-2013 operating expense budget. But before we actually move into those recommendations, I'd like to step back a moment and just review the issues that actually have brought us to this point in the process. Going back 4 years, our actual operating revenues have declined approximately $1.3 million over that time frame. Also over that same time frame, our operating expenses have increased moderately, less than 3% a year, but they've gone up as revenues have gone down. And as a result of that, operating expenses began exceeding operating revenues back in 2009, 2010. This school district has always operated on a very conservative budgeting approach, and because of that, we have very strong fund balances and reserves at the time that this reduction in revenues occurred. So we've been able to fill the gap with fund balances over the past couple years. The challenge is moving forward, if we don't make reductions, we will fall below our board policy fund balance reserve requirements within the next year, and then you'll see those balances drop off very quickly, and we will have a much greater budget issue to deal with if we don't make these changes at this time. You've all seen this schedule before. The top 2 lines are the revenues and expenses. The blue line is the revenues, red line expenses, and you can see where they intersected in 2009-10. The bottom 2 lines there, the flat line or the lavender color is the board policy reserve requirements. The tan line is our actual fund balances over that time frame, and you can see fund balances peaked in 2008-9, and we began spending them down over the past couple years, and we're approaching the point where we're going to hit those fund balance reserve requirements. Again, you can see it goes very negative if we don't make changes. So as a result of these issues we're facing, Dr. Marty pulled together a committee of administrators, an ad hoc budget review committee that met several times over the fall. They identified over 100 strategies for reducing the budget, narrowed it down to 30, which were categorized into, or put into 8 categories with projected savings between $7.4 and $9.73 million. The committee used a number of budget principles to make those, to narrow the numbers down or to make the recommendations. You've seen this several times as well, but I do want to reiterate the fact that everyone on the committee agreed that our strategic plan is our roadmap in budgeting, and that we cannot compromise the strategic plan. So that was the basis of moving forward with our research and these recommendations. So I'm just going to move then right on into our recommendations. We believe that we can adjust our district administrative and departmental support staffing to save between $1 and $1.25 million annually. We're recommending that we reduce the non-staffing school operating budgets and program operating budgets by $700,000 to $830,000. We believe that through greater efficiencies, we can save $1.4 million to $1.75 million annually. Personnel supporting teachers and students can be reorganized to generate $1.8 to $2.5 million in savings. We can adjust our numbers of teaching assistants and school secretarial staff to save between $1 and $1.2 million. Through school instructional staffing model adjustments, we can save $1.4 to $1.9 million. And by adjusting some of our use of premise revenues and our summer school fees, we can generate an additional $150,000 to $200,000. So the net impact of these recommendations is a $7.45 million to $9.63 million positive change in our budget. So at this point, I think I want to ask Dr. Marty to explain some changes to our recommendations that have occurred over the past couple weeks.
Thank you, Mark. I just want to take a moment before I get into the two changes that I want to highlight. I just want to compliment the Board of Education. Was mentioned that we've had a lot of coffees and discussion, and sincerely, we've had, I think, 9 or 10 coffees in our schools. We'll actually have some more continuing to talk about budget and other issues in our schools. But to be responsive to the January recommendations, we have had much discussion in our schools. I would say that those discussions at PTO meetings have ranged from probably 20, 25 folks at meetings to upwards to 100. And so we really appreciate the PTO's involvement, but also the board members that I think all of them have rotated and been at meetings. Also, we've had a lot of inquiries through email, letters that we have attempted to respond to and listen to sincerely, but also respond to. And we've been doing a lot of that. I want to thank also Paul Tandy for taking a lot of those questions and putting them into a frequently asked questions that now is posted on our webpage. And I think that has been very helpful for our community to really get a grasp of some of the issues at hand. We also have had a significant amount of discussion internally trying to answer questions also of our staff members. And so we have spent a lot of time, in summation, responding to questions and communication over the last month since the recommendation was initially made. I also just want to one more time compliment the ad hoc group who put in many, many hours, as well as other administrators, other staff members. And I'd be remiss if I also did not thank Joanna Bozeman, Julie Pepper, and Vito for a lot of attention so we could work through some contractual issues and how we could really handle our professional staff attrition plan. And I want to thank them for really working to really come to a situation we could all be satisfied with the fact that we would not lay off teachers or professional staff at this time. And we're really pleased about that. We have a 2-year window. So again, thank those many people that have been involved. Now to just address really 2 major adjustments that we're making from the January recommendations. We had, at the previous recommendation, we had talked about restructuring our registrars. And we'll continue to do that. We're going to have registration or registrars at the various areas, the 4 areas of the school district. In doing that, our elementary principals expressed some concerns about the potential of losing a position, which was more than just a registrar duties. And so with that input to Dr. Bonnie Maxey and the elementary principals, we have looked at elementary schools having 3 major staff members for all their schools. There are three major office personnel: a principal secretary, a program secretary, and a staff secretary. And that will be for all our elementary schools, and it will certainly satisfy the internal and external traffic that goes through an elementary school. So that's a bit of a change, and does really allow us still to move forward with the registrar's change, but also certainly maintains good support in elementary schools. We'll continue to certainly monitor that and certainly see if there's other changes we can make, but we certainly did not want to in any way compromise the good work that needs to go on in our elementary schools to meet the needs of many folks. The other significant change is for the board members is number 4, personnel that assist our teachers and our learners. We have received a significant amount of discussion, obviously, about those changes, and we have restructured an instructional coach, which we want to move forward on. We also believe that we're going to maintain much of the reading support. The reduction is really only 2.5 staff members per level. As we really were looking at the formation of the math facilitator position, of which we really feel is necessary. It's a position that will address both the needs of students but also classroom teachers. Perhaps we came to the realization that reducing from 23 to 12 the number of people that were working with math was a bit ambitious, and so we're adjusting that number to something closer to 18. And really, quite honestly, in all these areas of need, we will continue to evaluate. Budgets are dynamics, they're plans, and as we move closer to the actual start of next school year, as we've been telling our parents and telling our internal staff as well, we certainly will always be attentive to the needs of students, and we'll always be willing to work with our staff and with the Board of Education to come to you if we ever need additional staff. But we want to adjust that math facilitator position to something in the neighborhood of 18 positions, or 18 positions at this time. But again, we'll leave the door open for further evaluation if we have significant needs. Other than that, the discussion of some of the details remain the same, and we would recommend the board move forward with the recommendations as we made them with these 2 adjustments. Mark is now just going to finish up what's next in the process.
So, moving forward, we will be asking for your approval of these recommendations tonight. Human Resources has been meeting with the potentially impacted employee groups, and we'll continue doing that over the next few weeks. And we plan to know by April 15th whether or not we'll need to lay off anyone. And then we would plan to move forward and implement these recommendations July 1. So at this point, we would ask that the Board of Education approve the 2012-13 budget reduction recommendations as presented. And we're hopefully prepared to answer any questions you may have.
All right, I know that the various board members will have some questions. I would just like to phrase it first that a budget is a plan, and everybody has things that come up in their budgets that mean that there are changes, and as a board, we would certainly hope that as we look at this down the road, that we would make adjustments where it might affect children, especially where it might affect children, and that's what we would expect of you to do. So, and just to be flexible as we go through this, so that we know we have to reduce the money so that our revenues and our expenses are equal, and hopefully at some point in time we start building up those fund balances again. The state requires by law, I mean, we get some pretty good scrutiny if we go below 6%. That's for Parkway, that's always been considered way too aggressive. We need to be much more conservative than we are, and that's why we have a policy that was established many years ago to have a fund balance of 17%. And it's prudent. It allows us to function without having to go out and borrow very many times. So, board members, are there any other questions that you'd like to pose to administration on this? Mr. Major, we'll start at your end.
I'll defer to some other questions since my speaking voice is a little limited tonight, and I'll bat clean up if it's all right with you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Well, just getting back to the math facilitators and lit coaches and the instructional coaches. Just to clarify, the instructional coaches are That's the new position, right?
Correct.
Okay, and then the math facilitator as opposed to the math intervention specialist.
Correct.
Okay, so the instructional coaches are supposed to add additional support in addition to the math facilitators, right?
The instructional coaches will be working with staff. Actually, I'm going to let someone answer this accurately.
Well, that was,
You were doing really well.
yeah, I mean, because what I'm getting to is these decisions were deferred to the educators, to the curriculum people.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Just if you can clarify how those positions will interact as opposed to how the current model works.
Instructional coaches as opposed to lit coaches? Will that help
Well,
you, Tom? or-
instructional coaches and how they might work with the math facilitators.
Oh, okay. Instructional coaches will work in the 4 content areas and hopefully with our specialists as well. And they will work on, I'm trying not to use the lingo, but more on stage 3 of our curriculum. So they'll be working with teachers around lessons to differentiate and accelerate and to meet the needs of individual students in stage 3. Up to now, our focus really has been around stage 1, which is what do we want students to know and be able to do. So our lit coaches in the past have worked quite a bit with the written curriculum in communication arts. And now our instructional coaches will move to stage 3. And their work will also include, as we move to Common Core, our National Common Core standards, our instructional coaches will be able to work with more than just ComArts. So that's a change. And how will they work with math facilitators? The instructional coaches, I would say would work in conjunction with math facilitators around stage 3 and look for more integration. But our math facilitators, their focus is math. Where the instructional coaches is a little bit broader, the math curriculum has to be their #1 priority. And math facilitators will also be working with students and working with interventions. And some of them, depending on the school and depending on the need, might work more with students than with adults. But either way, we know we need that focus on math in a way just like we had focus on literacy with our lit coaches. Does that help?
Yeah.
Am I close? Okay. Okay.
Can I piggyback onto your question without
Absolutely.
interrupting you?
Sure.
Since it's on the same.
Uh-huh.
We've heard a lot of concern from parents about the reading specialists and the math interventionists.
Work with students.
Right. If we weren't doing budget cuts, would we be looking at this anyway? That's my question.
I think, as you know, the last 2 years, we have worked with our community, teachers and community, around efficient use of resources, Goal 6. And so, yes, it's come up quite a bit because we have students with needs in some buildings that we are not able to reach those students because of the way we deploy our interventionist. So 2 years ago, as you know, we started deploying our reading interventionist at the district level, which meant that we had to move them depending on student need. And we're in our 2nd year of doing that. And so there's criteria that we use as to how we deploy the reading interventionist to certain schools. We'd like to do the same thing now with math intervention. It depends on the year, and sometimes it can be as fluid as the middle of the year. We have some schools that have higher mobility, and students move in, and all of a sudden they need support, and there's no one there. So we are looking at Goal 6. How do we deploy our resources efficiently and effectively to where the need is? So we had begun that with reading interventionist. We would like to do the same thing with math interventionist.
Okay. And with the reading specialists, we currently have 48.5 reading specialists. We're cutting 2.5.
Right. That's K-8.
And before we had reading specialists, after Prop R, I don't know how you came to the number that we needed 48.5, but I always thought it would probably adjust down the road, that it wasn't necessarily we were going to keep 48.5 forever. And honestly, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need any of them. That would be awesome if we...
That would be a pretty perfect world.
Wouldn't it be neat?
Yes.
We would be
That's
getting
not
to
our
all,
reality.
wouldn't we?
We would be. We'd change our mission. We would have achieved it, yeah.
Okay. I guess I'm just bothered because people don't think there's a plan for this.
Yeah.
And I feel there is a plan. I don't know if Dr. Maxey wants to speak on that too. I think we need to say it out loud.
So the question in regard to the plan for how we're going to staff?
For the reading specialists and the math.
It is a question that has come up at a number of our coffees that we've held. And so, yes, I do. We brought the criteria so that we could speak to that if that were a question tonight and be more specific with some of the points of the criteria. So, of course, we look at total enrollment of the school, which fluctuates some or much depending on the school. We look at mobility. We look at the number of children on free and reduced lunch, because that is a factor in looking at academic achievement. We look at different data points on how students have measured who have been in school in regard to their reading success. We look at how they have performed on the MAP test, those who are basic or below basic. We look at the percentage of students who are below our district assessments, performing in the lower end of our district assessments. We look at what schools are in school improvement based on the state criteria for school improvement. Schools who are Title I, of course, again, those are affected by a number of the factors. Oh, I'm sorry, Lisa's here, and she is the person. I would not have gone on and on. We're glad you're here.
Well, and I think to just bridge from that data into school data, and each of our schools, and Lisa, with the reading interventionists, have created by school, then other criteria by grade level. So once the district, in looking at this, and at the school level, there's a literacy team who then takes it and then assigns students to specific reading interventionists. This same model is what we're looking at for mathematics. I will tell you the challenge for mathematics is we don't have the type of reading diagnostic testing at our hand that we have with reading, but we think we can find that with math, and that's what we're looking for. So if you have specific questions about that chart, and then every school having a chart by students, and some of the criteria for this, Dee, is, and that's why she's here in case you ask, but it's by grade level, like letter ID and stay 9, CAP and stay 9, word test and stay 9, writing vocabulary and stay 9. And for each grade level, then it's depending on when the common assessments start and the criteria. And anything else for Lisa? So it is very specific criteria and defined.
And Dee, can I leverage off of yours? Most of these positions were products of Prop R, and were implemented. Is that true or not true?
Not reading intervention.
Right, that's Title I.
Right.
Okay.
Reading intervention, we've had.
I can't give the specific year, and part of the reading intervention specialists are funded through Parkway local funds, and part are funded through the federal Title I funds, which comes through the state. So there's a dual funding source there. So our buildings who receive Title I funds actually have more reading intervention staffing per student than the non-Title I.
And that's been true for 10 years or more?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay. Now, some of the other are more recently acquired positions. Those were initially allocated 5 and 6 years ago, is that correct?
Right. Prop R brought our math intervention specialists.
And how were those positions allocated at that time?
At that time, 1 per school,
and
in
why,
elementary and middle.
And why was that?
At that time, we were building the intervention program for mathematics, and we found as we looked at our mathematics MAP test and looked at performance, we had close to, that was a while ago, about 58% of our students were not proficient in elementary mathematics on the MAP test. And as you remember our current reality conversations, and it was mentioned before from a parent, we weren't seeing the growth. In fact, our math achievement data was this, if not So very quickly, and it was very quickly, we put common assessments in place, and we brought in math interventionists to work with our most struggling learners in math
Okay.
in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
And I guess to Dee's point, what's the current status in that regard?
Our proficient-
What do we know now that we did not know then?
Oh, I think we know so much more now. With our see, at the time we deployed the math interventionist, we didn't have common assessment data that we felt was reliable. And over the last 3 or 4 years, we've been able to, our math common assessments that we give are predictive with the MAP test. So that in itself, having common assessments that are given district-wide, and I'm speaking to elementary right now, that are now in the PARS system that we can look at, and they are predictive. And we are able to then look at those assessments and see what particular glees or strands that our students struggle with. So we also know what we can do with the general ed classroom teacher. For instance, time. We know time and money have been issues for a couple of years, and that's something that we can work on with all of our math teachers in the elementary grades. So much more now, and a lot of it has to do with having our common assessments in place.
Okay. And then to tie this back to our strategic plan and some of what we learned from Project Parkway, I think a term of art maybe, but something that stood out when we looked hard at ourselves in the mirror as a district was that equity does not equal equal.
Right.
I think in years past, Parkway's been substantially site-based, and I think there was, as a representative from the south end of the district, there was, I think the way the board viewed things in the past was make sure we get our share. So I think to me in this process, learning, and as I've learned over the last 4 or 5 years, where we can respond to the individual needs of students, and they really do differ school by school by school. And so I think the notion that we should be allocating resources, one each, to principals is, it was a way to do things in the past, but a lot of the work we've done in the last 5 years gives us the power to get away from that. And so it is change, but I think change directed in precisely the place it ought to be, and that's focused on individual children.
And I think what's critical to be remembered, I think after Prop R, I would say maybe 2 years into it, it's not that we haven't asked for more help in the north area, and Lisa and I were talking about that, because we know we have schools in the north area, and I don't want to just one area. We have schools in all of our areas that needed more support. And that's why we went 2 years ago to district deployment. We just didn't even then have the funds to say, let's add to that 48.5 when we knew we had some resources that we weren't using to the full potential in some schools. And I think it is critical, your question, we didn't have this ability 5 years ago when we deployed our math intervention specialist. We couldn't do this kind of criteria. And to your question about, there is a cutoff score. You want to speak to that? It is.
Yeah, so as each building looks at their students, and then they begin collecting this data in the spring so that we can start serving students in reading intervention as quickly as possible at the beginning of the year. So much of this is collected on spring data, and then the new data for students moving in, or the MAP data is added in the fall. Each building currently, as you put in all of the data, then you total their points, and you determine a cut score that students with a score of 36 and higher will get services. Right now, the cut score is determined at each building depending on how many reading specialists are there. Instead of having a district cut score of, across the district, if you hit this cut score in 2nd grade, you will get reading intervention. So the cut scores are different in each building based on their capacity of how many students they can pick up based on their staffing. So to truly district employ, we will need cut scores that are consistent across the district.
So where one student may be 6 months behind getting reading intervention or math intervention support in one building, and another one in another building could be a year and a half behind and not getting support. And that goes back to your fair isn't always equal comment. And so we just have to get better at how we're servicing.
And to our promise for all children. That's what you were speaking to.
That help with this?
It does.
And our goal then is to have a similar model with math. And we're waiting on your approval. We didn't want to go too far down the path of creating something similar. And we certainly want to hire our math facilitators, instructional coaches to help with this process, because that is what we did with PropR. We hired people and helped build the model with the people that we hired. So we're waiting to get our experts to the table to help do this with math as well.
And I may be guilty of getting way too far into the weeds here, but you mentioned intervention models, and I guess to put it in fundamental terms, and I think this is something I've become familiar with working on the SSD Governing Council, the notion of pullouts versus push-ins. And I think a lot of people are familiar with and comfortable with the notion of pullouts, and that the idea that the child can work at his or her own pace in a pullout situation. Can you talk about that a little bit, and where we've been, where we're going?
You know, it truly does depend on the individual student. So again, this is one level of data. Then we need to look at what were their strengths within their data profile and what were their needs. And then based on the needs, determine the intensity and frequency of the intervention. And if it's a child who has a significant gap, then a pull-out, more intense, might be appropriate. For other children, if the gap isn't as significant, or if it's across-the-board gap instead of peaks and valleys, then it might be a less intense push-in, less frequent. And so, again, this is a midpoint data. Now we need to go down and, after we determine who we will serve, and determine their needs, and is push-in or pull-out, is it a service provided by the classroom teacher with additional support through differentiation within the classroom, or is it more intensive pull-out? So it's student by student, and what are their needs.
And I guess the aspect that I didn't recognize before the last few years was there is a cost to a pullout.
Oh,
the child is losing ground in whatever the classroom is doing,
You missed something.
whether it's the same subject matter or if a different subject matter is being covered.
And I think in a couple of our walks, you have been able to visit with some of our math interventionists who are already pushing in. And for some students, depending on need, maybe it is pull out. And maybe it's, we've heard the language, double dose. And sometimes it's pushing in and we have guided reading in our literacy block. We're looking at guided math. And what does that look like with a specialist in the room working on that? I had John come up here just so you start linking some of the lingo in terms. Our progress monitoring, our intervention, it's not only getting them in the right place. I know that was one of the questions that some of you received from parents. We have to monitor their progress. And this is all of our students. It's students with IEPs. Sometimes we put them in intervention and we don't go back and check to be sure it's working. And John, working with coordinators and teachers and principals, hopefully beginning with our principals next Wednesday, is building a district-wide model of progress monitoring. And our PLC process is part of this, because way too often, what it looks like in a middle school is that child continues to get an F, and we just keep going with that F or that D, when sometimes we need to look at doing something differently. And so the progress monitoring, John's kind of overseeing how we're going to develop that model district-wide. Because it's not just getting them in the right interventions, it's also being sure that that intervention is working.
Okay, and I apologize for sidetracking the conversation, but I thought it was good context to realize we are fundamentally changing some of the ways we do business here.
And that's good for kids.
Kathy, I'd like you to clarify something. This morning, when Liz Morrison was presenting to us about the PLCs to the PTO leadership, she was talking about one of the things the elementary teachers, the team-level teachers are going to be doing during that time is creating and writing their common assessments. Okay, so when you're talking about the common assessment data that you have, is that district-wide common assessment data, or is that school-wide?
One of the things our DAD PMI team are doing is we have a glossary, because sometimes we use the same language for different assessments. So just to clarify, back to Bruce's point, 4 years ago, we just did in elementary district-wide common assessments. Everybody's doing them. Let's get this done. We needed some markers, benchmarks of how the kids were doing. With PLC, our PLCs will be creating formative assessments. And that third grade teacher team will look at the unit and say, what do we want these students, look at that stage 1 and determine we want some pre-assessments, and then we want to do some check-ins. And that's formative. If you do something with the assessment in your classroom, it's called formative assessment. Some of our district common assessments were not able to respond as quickly. So our DAD PMI team with John and Julie Collins are looking at, can we cut back on some of those district-wide common assessments now that we're ready to create our own formative assessments? Because see, formative assessments can respond to those students right there in the classroom.
Right.
District benchmark assessments, it's the same across the district, irregardless of who's in your classroom.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we're looking at, as we bring up PLC process and the creation of formative assessments, and our teachers do it all the time, but a team of teachers with the same formative assessment.
Okay, now moving back to our topic at hand. We talked at some of the coffees this week about the growth in the literacy interventions, but I sensed that there was not quite the same level of growth in our math interventions. And I think, first of all, the numbers are so different.
Right.
So can you talk for a minute about why we have such a great number of literacy interventionists and how the smaller number of math interventionists, facilitators, are really going to have an impact on student growth?
I want you to take all the components of literacy.
You know, whenever we look at communication arts, it is encompassing of reading and writing, listening, speaking, and informational literacy, reading in the content areas. And it is also, there's such correlation between how reading develops and how the other content areas develop. And so it really is, you know, as Dr. Maxey says, the foundational piece, the reciprocal development between reading and writing. And we have been fortunate to have the staffing to have the increase that we have, without a doubt. But it's just a broader content area with more areas for difficulty.
So that's why we've got 46 versus the 23 that...
Right.
And in addition, our Title I plan at this time is based only on reading, and each year as we reevaluate our LEA plan, that would be something that could be considered as, do we broaden the Title I LEA plan to help support other areas of need for students at risk in the district? And I think that's something that we need to continually look at our data and be responsive to and reconsider as we rewrite the LEA plan each year.
Okay. Besides the push-in, pull-out that we just talked about, what are some of the things that we can take from our literacy model and learn from it and apply it to our math model to help that move along a little better?
What we saw in some of the program evaluations, and I keep talking about double dosing, some students don't need one or the other, they need both. And finding the time in the day and where you pull kids from. So we have learned in our literacy model that sometimes the double dose gives us more achievement gains. I would say the other thing from the literacy model that we're learning is there is a mini lesson in our literacy block where there's direct instruction, and you've all probably seen it in your walks, and it's usually in the elementary classroom. They're all up huddled around the teacher, and it's short, 10, 15, depending on the grade level. And then they disperse into smaller groups working on other tasks. And we are trying that in mathematics. And I think with literacy, 4 years ago, we had things in place when we got to Prop R for literacy. But what we were able to do with literacy is work on getting the written curriculum improved, getting the assessment improved, and also adding the intervention. All of that on literacy hits, we know causes some gains. And that's another reason we would like our math facilitators also working on the written curriculum. And that's a piece, it's not, our written math curriculum is not to the level that our ComArts written curriculum is. And so that is what we've learned. When there's more resources and more lessons in stage 3, it absolutely can improve achievement. It's a system.
Right.
It's not one or the other. It's a system working together.
And as we're moving to individual student growth measurements
Right.
versus,
Right.
you know, comparing this year's test to that year's last year's student, I don't
Right.
even really know how to say what they do. It never made any sense to me, but, right?
Yes.
When we're looking at individual student growth, are we going to be able to, oh gosh, I don't know how to put this in words. Go to somebody else, and I'm gonna think about a better way to form my question.
But you're right. For No Child Left Behind, we're involved, in fact, headed to Jeff City tomorrow to encourage our commissioner to go to the growth model. Because what you're saying, I gotta use my hands. What you're saying, Beth, is if our students come in at this achievement level and they move to this level, but they haven't hit proficiency,
Right.
there's no credit for that. But we've moved these students this far. The waiver is saying that what we care about is that there's growth. Not just at some target, arbitrary target sometimes, but that we will say if you're sitting in our classrooms, that child will grow. And we want to monitor it. We want to monitor it about every 6 weeks to be sure that whatever we're doing is having some influence on the growth of achievement for our students.
Okay, and another thing I keep hearing about, which I really hadn't heard about before, was flexible grouping in math.
Right.
Is that something that we're currently doing, or we're just going to move to that next year? Because that to me makes a lot of sense.
We have in some schools started to dabble with that, exactly.
And I think our our professional learning community work will lend itself to that, because as we look at individual students and where they are and look at their work, then we can determine what it is needed and then flexibly group children for what concept strand or whatever their needs call for.
I think they're doing that in Algebra 1.
Yes. Yes. It's similar, and we've never had the time in the day in the elementary school to have what we call an intervention time. Some of our schools have it, and we need to look at the success of that time now and then have that conversation. But a lot of the flexible grouping, and in fact, I think some of us saw that at Sorrento, that there's a 30-minute block, and there's a 4th grade team, and they literally say, you go here to work on this strand, you go here with this teacher, you go here with this 30-minute flexible grouping back into the classroom.
For a double dose.
So that way, the classroom teachers can also be participating in the intervention.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And when Rick DeFore, you were there a little bit last night, the power comes when this teacher who says, okay, my kids are getting this particular concept, I'll take the ones that are struggling with this particular concept. So when you can attach a teacher's expertise to a student's need for a short amount of time is where that's what he said yesterday about the PLC process. Then you know you have a true PLC. It's using the adults and their expertise to work with the most struggling students.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you.
Acceleration.
And accelerate. So
right.
there are, in that same strategy group, there are kids that got 100% on the pre-assessment. And Beth, some of our schools have been telling us, and you can go in and look at that, I mean, pre-assessment, I just went in the other day and looked at one, and 100% on the pre-assessment. We can't then teach the same unit to those students because they got it. And our teachers are working through that as well.
Thank you.
Ellen? I know you've been waiting.
That's okay, thank you. And while I was listening, I did have another comment I wanted to make, but attending some of these coffees and the PTO meetings, and we're listening to the parents and some teachers, and just to, if someone could address some of these comments that we have heard. One, parents concerned that they have not been involved in this and they didn't have a voice. They felt this way. That they didn't have representation. Teachers as well. Also, you were just speaking about levels, and some parents are concerned about the kids in the middle. You have, and Dr. Marty did try to explain this last night at Mason Ridge. You have the kids that need the extra help. You have the kids that are in programs such as Mosaics. But some parents were concerned about the kids in the middle. So if we could cover that for the parents and some of the teachers as well.
I'll take the first question, and then I think Kathy can cover that middle, child in the middle issue. Admittedly, we did not involve a widespread of individuals because we really felt it was necessary. We addressed the 12-13 budget, and this was really a September decision, and we have budget processes starting in December, January. So we tried to do the best we could, and we really did, as Mark said, they had 100 or more recommendations, of which 30 or a good third of those recommendations were items that we put off to the side. They were just complicated and really did need the input of many other stakeholders, both staff and community. So we tried to deal with those things that we thought were operational and also were things that we could change perhaps, as Kathy said, perhaps because maybe it was time to look at things like our interventionists and some of the support. So we tried to certainly be careful of the work we did. Going forth, as I've been pointing out, we will, with Strategy 6 of Project Parkway, be much more transparent and much more inclusive in terms of who we include at the table, be it staff or parents, especially as we get into some of those issues, depending on what they may be. But admittedly, we, and certainly this is not something I would choose to do, did move more quickly internally to put some recommendations because, as was stated, we thought it was so vital to begin to intervene in our budget process now rather than put it off for one more year. Ellen, did I answer that?
You did.
So, okay. Kathy's going to talk about the middle.
I think what you're seeing now as we move to the different models and back to 4 years ago, we were attacking the ends. And that's, at that time, exactly what we needed to do, of just the students that were at risk, and also our gifted program, for those students in the Mosaics Level 4, some of the things that we've been able to do. Where we are moving now with our instructional coach and our math facilitator working with the adults, that is the average, the all. The strategy groups that we're talking about, remember that there's an average group there too that we're accelerating. So we are able, through instructional coaches, math facilitators, and what we're doing with Stage 3, we are able then to put resources to all kids, middle kids as well. So I do think in the PLC process, it is about average students and how do we keep accelerating those kids as well. And sometimes our average students have this one thing they need to work on. And in the past, we've never really, it's the strategy groups or the pushing in or the guided reading that this group of kids just needs a little bit right there to get pushed back in. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Kathy.
You good?
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Well, I have a comment.
Please.
We've gotten a lot of emails, a couple of phone calls, not so many, but several of the emails suggested that why don't you just go out and have a tax measure, put it on the ballot and raise taxes. It sounds easy, but Prop R took us 35 years to pass, and it's not because we didn't try several times. It's very hard, very expensive, very time-consuming, as most of us know, to get those things passed. And we're lucky that we have a cushion. We're not maxed out at our tax rate, and we have to be very careful. I mean, we could just raise the tax rate up to the ceiling and but we'd be left with no options. I think we all strongly feel we have to really protect what we can. And it's not easy to make these cuts. Nobody wants to cut employees. But we really feel, well, I feel it's the prudent thing to do. So.
Thank you very much.
Well, and I'd like to say that, I mean, to be able to do these type of budget cuts at this particular juncture without laying off the professional staff and that, I think is, I mean, it indicates that we really did take a systematic look and approach to this. And I think it's just in time.
I just add a thought to your two comments. I believe that, in a sense, it is our obligation first to look internally. It's you know, is it easier to go out, or is it sometimes to look at the look to our public? But we have to be responsible to our public, both administration and board. So I really appreciate the comment, Dee. I think it is our obligation to look at ourselves first. As we've been saying, as Paul Tandy says so many times, that we're in economic times that this affected almost every family to some degree, or certainly extended family. So I think we as a district have to be responsible to our, I think Chris has stated 70% of our residents who don't have children in school, so we have to be responsible to everybody, but also take care of our children, most importantly. So I think there's that balance.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you can
Chris,
tell, I'm sorry, go ahead, Bruce.
Just to leverage off, and I think I noted in Mark's comments, he mentioned that our revenues are down $1.5 million from 4 years ago. Is that right? If you look at the 50 years of Parkway's existence, revenues grew between 3 and 5% in a very steady curve from the 50s through 2007.
Good point.
Saying our revenues are off $1.5 million, then why are we talking about $7 to $9 million in cuts? I think if you look at how far below the projections our revenues are, that's really where the story is, and I think that's the story of where the country is right now. A couple of weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal, there was a chart that laid that out pretty well. It had the GDP growth curve over the last 50 years, and the departure over the last 4 years has been dramatic. We are literally in uncharted waters as an economy and as a government, as a public entity. That's our reality, and then I hate to be the party pooper here, but this is the first step. If the economy continues, we're looking at more of the same coming in the next 3 years. So I think that's the cold hard reality right now.
And you did hit it right on target. The 3 years ago, 4 years ago was the first time in the history of Parkway School District where our revenues went down from 1 year to the next. It's uncharted waters.
And we've been very lucky here, because you look around us at surrounding districts, not just our neighbors, but across the state, and they've had to deal with this 2 and 3 years ago. I remember, I think 2 years ago, I went to at the MSBA conference, a session on riffing employees, and all I could think of was, oh, I'm so glad we don't have to do that in Parkway. Well,
and because of the conservative fiscal policies that this Board of Education's had over the years, we were able to avoid some of those cuts longer than many other organizations have.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I think I've heard it referred to as a rainy day fund. Well, it's been raining about 4 years now, so.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your comments and for your interest. I'd just like to say this has been an extremely important topic for the board. It's occupied by far our interest and focus over the last month more than anything else, and probably with deeper study and interest than anything we've done in the last several years. I think we've been thoughtful and careful about this. Of course, we don't have a crystal ball to see the future. budgets are dynamic. There'll probably be some flexibility in there, but it'll continue to be our focus to make sure that what we're doing will continue to help what we do in the classroom. And because the only yardstick we really care about is the one is what's right for kids. With that being said, if there are no other comments, may I ask for a motion and a second to approve the budget reduction recommendations for 2012-2013.
So moved.
Second.
And Ms. Calenda, I'd like to ask for a roll call on that.
Mr. Alabama?
Yes.
Mrs. Castillo?
Yes.
Mrs. Feldman?
Yes.
Mr. Major?
Yes.
Mrs. Mogerman?
Yes.
Mr. Jacob?
Yes. The measure carries 6-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will move on to 12.0 reports. 12.01, eliminate class rank and adopt the Latin cum laude system. And we look forward to hearing from Mrs. Charlotte E.J. on this subject. I will say, Charlotte, we're looking forward to this. We've heard from you twice on it, and from our South High principal too, and we're looking forward to what you bring to us tonight.
A little short, so I have to pull it down. To Board President Chris Jacob, I'm just going to take this off because this is Vice President Mrs. Feldman, Directors of the Board, Superintendent Marty, Ms. Calanda, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to present the recommendation to eliminate class rank and adopt the Latin cum laude system for Parkway graduates, beginning with our current 8th graders, the class of 2016. In November 2011, a proposal to look at other options to recognize our students who graduate with academic honors was presented to the Board of Education. An outline of this presentation will cover a brief history background of this initiative, presentations to other groups, key issues, and finally, recommendations to the board. When students are allowed to stretch themselves and take classes because they are curious about the content without the risk of falling out of the top 10, students decided by grade point average it will encourage them to take courses directly toward different career paths. The Latin cum laude system creates the environment for high-achieving students to meet Parkway's goal 2, Measurable Objective 3, which states all students will sustain high levels of creativity and expand the capacity for divergent thinking they exhibit in their early childhood years. There are several key reasons why moving to the cum laude system would be beneficial for Parkway students. Parkway's Goal 1, Measurable Objective 5, that says all students will graduate and be well prepared for their future, is a great reason to introduce students to the system because it actually mirrors how universities recognize its graduates who have obtained high levels of academic achievement. The College Board states
Class ranking is just a mathematical summary of a student's academic record as compared with other students in his or her class. Because acceptance to universities is based on more than rank and grade point average, students have to be involved in the school and community, take courses that are challenging but related to their career goals, and get to know their teachers well enough to obtain letters of recommendation. The brightest students must be well-rounded in order to compete with national and international students. The cum laude system eliminates the need to rank among the top 10 students, which will allow them to take courses that are not necessarily honors, but will give them insight into their career path. Also, more Parkway students will be recognized with honors. There are several outcomes to changing from class rank to the Latin cum laude system. First, it certainly aligns with Parkway's vision statement. We succeed when all students and graduates are fully prepared for their next educational challenges and pursuing a personal direction based on an understanding of their talents and interests. When students are encouraged to take a course that inspires them, they are more likely to take it when they don't have to worry about ranking among the top 10 students. They are more likely to pursue their talents and interests and transfer their learning beyond high school. Most colleges and universities use the Latin cum laude system for recognition, and Parkway students will already be familiar with the process. At the same time, sorry, I'm trying to turn pages at the same time. Same time, they are already, not only are they, will be able to recognize the system that they're going to be walking into, but Parkway will continue, they will also continue to rank the states in the state's top 10 highest performing schools list. And I'm sure that's something that we all would like to see happen. There are always students, some students who are hesitant about taking courses that are not weighted for fear of lowering their grade point average. For example, even though the history course, East Asian Studies, is not an honors class, with the Latin cum laude system, students could take it because they are simply interested in this course and not avoid it for fear of lowering their grade point average. Students will be free to become a more curious learner and would be more capable, I think, because they have taken more courses outside of the regular honors classes. More importantly, this system will lessen the stress, which will enable students to be physically and emotionally healthy, as indicated in Goal 3, Measurable Objective 2. We're going to look at some responses from area high schools, because that is one of the things that we had to do before we would even consider recommending this. In checking with other high schools in the area, many of them have changed to the Latin cum laude system already to honor their graduates. When asked why they changed, many of them thought it would be an advantage when competing for scholarships. Many thought they were not rewarding enough students for their hard work. I've lost my place, I'm sorry. They were not rewarding students for their hard work. Also, many of them wanted to be consistent with surrounding districts. And parents also urged some districts to take a look at ranking versus other options. We also looked at where would we be had we decided to use this method a long time ago, or a while back. If the Latin cum laude system had been in effect earlier, this slide indicates how many more students would have been in the district would have been overall honored. The numbers would have been significantly higher for each of the Parkway high schools. More importantly, the district totals for the highest honors would have been almost 200 students at each high school in 2010 and in 2011. One of the other things that we needed to do was to look at other colleges and universities out there to see what would the difference be if we changed from the class rank system. And in speaking with college admissions directors, we wanted to know if eliminating class rank could have an impact on students' admissions. Would it in fact keep them from being actually admitted? After polling selective to highly selective colleges, it was unanimous that eliminating class rank would not have an impact on admission because they look at every aspect of the student. Majority of the colleges that we talk to recalculate the grade point average. They look at the rigor of the courses they take. They and they also look at time spent in and out of school on extracurricular activities. They look at letters of recommendation. They read great essays, and also the students have to submit personal statements. And as a reminder, our students are actually competing with international as well as national students. They also look at leadership skills and test scores. In general, colleges and universities want well-rounded students, not just students who have soared academically. In Ken Robinson's book, The Element, he states, of course, many people do well in their schools and love what they have to offer, but too many graduates are leaving early, unsure of their real talents, and not knowing what direction to take next. Not having to limit themselves to just honors classes and to be able to explore different courses because of personal interests, moving away from the class ranking system will allow students to figure out their real talents and the direction they need to take. Now for the recommendations. One of Parkway's vision statements reminds us that we succeed when all our students and graduates are pursuing a personal direction based on an understanding of their talents and interests. After careful consideration, research of similar high schools in the metropolitan area, speaking with several colleges and universities, meeting with the Board of Education, administrators, community stakeholders, students, and parents, we would like to move forward the recommendations for the board review and hopefully approval, the Latin cum laude system to recognize Parkway School District's graduates who have attained the highest academic achievement. Therefore, the recommendations are to eliminate class rank, implement the Latin cum laude system beginning with the class of 2016, which are our current 8th graders, use the following Latin cum laude criteria for distinction. For instance, summa cum laude students who have earned a 4.0 and above. The color of the cord would be gold. Magna cum laude system students would have earned a 3.75 to 3.99 grade point average. Color of the cord would be silver. Cum laude students would have earned a 3.5 to a 3.749, and the color of that cord would be orange. Acknowledgement of academic honors will be placed on the student's diploma and final transcript. When a student's modified curriculum credit total equals or exceeds 20% of their total credits attempted, he or she will not be included in the cum laude recognition system program, in keeping with the same guidelines as we have now. And lastly, we recommend eliminating the recognition of a class valedictorian. Again, I would like to thank you for considering the recommendations to move from class rank top 10 students to the Latin cum laude honors system for recognizing our highest achieving students. In summary, I would like to say that all Parkway students we want all of our Parkway students to be curious, confident, and capable, and our students deserve to be recognized for their hard work in attaining their highest potential while becoming well prepared for the next level. And now if you have any questions for me, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Any questions? I think you did a good job.
Thank you. I had a problem with my paper, though.
Well, we're looking forward to this, and I think when we think of our mission, allowing students to be curious and not have to play the system to be recognized for their excellence, that this will be a great step forward for them.
I guess I do have a question.
Okay.
When is this going to be moving forward? What's the next step here?
We would like to bring it back in March for your approval. And if you have any questions along the way between now and March, please, please address them with Charlotte or any of us. I did want to say that since Charlotte's presentation back in the fall, she has presented to counselors, to principals, to PTO presidents. I'm sure other informal discussions she's had, but she's done a marvelous job of really taking this to several stakeholders, and so her presentation night is after a lot of input and a lot of discussion.
And I also want to say that the counselors who go down to the 8th grade to talk to the 8th graders have already introduced them to the concept of change, and so I've heard from a lot of, well, not a lot, maybe 2 or 3 parents, and they really get it. They were a little afraid at first, but then they really get it now.
And those school districts that have this, they also do not have a valedictorian?
Some do, and some do not.
Okay. And what was the feelings why you wouldn't have a valedictorian?
When I talked with the credit review committee and when we met, and it was just, they felt it was too, some thought it was okay, that it would be a great idea, but more than not, I would say most of them felt that it wasn't. And even those schools that have changed to this model, some of them have also implemented other criteria. But we decided that it would not be. It doesn't mean it can't be changed, but I just thought, I know that all of our high schools absolutely were for not recognizing the #1 student.
Okay. All right.
And I guess
just overall, with regards to that, the conversation really at the credit review committee and prior to that was, if you didn't do that, then you wouldn't eliminate some of those things you're going to limit, because you'd still have those 10, 15 kids from the get-go probably not making the best choices along the way, or choices that they wouldn't normally without that idea of competing to get close to that spot. So that's really the essence of it. They thought it would defeat the purpose of the whole system if they still maintain that 1 ranking.
Okay.
I think Desi addressed my concern there.
Well, thank you very much, Charlotte. I guess you're going to hang close there as you come up and help Steve talk about the social emotional action team update.
All right, if I could, okay, thank you.
Yes, very much so.
Okay. To the board president, Chris Jacob, start all over again. Vice President, Mrs. Feldman, directors of the board, Superintendent Marty and Ms. Klanda, good evening. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to come before you to present an overview of where we are on Project Parkway's Goal 3 Measurable Objective 2. All students will report that they are physically and emotionally safe in Parkway. Dr. Steve Colombo, Director of Special Services, will be presenting with me tonight. Michael Barilak is one of the co-chairs and could not be here. He's coordinator of student discipline, could not be here because he has a job-related conflict and just couldn't make it. He's at a conference. The overview of things that we're going to be looking at tonight, we're going to break it down into 3 different areas. What is the social emotional action team? updates on the work this year, specifically the bullying survey, share the direction for the future work of the action team. In addition, this presentation will address 3 key areas: the history and timeline of the work, the findings and recommendations that came out of Project Parkway's School Climate and Bullying Task Force and School Climate Advisory, and the Social Emotional Action Team, and an introduction to our thinking around the implementation of a possible model for social emotional expectations and standards of standards in Parkway, of behavior in Parkway, for Parkway. We go back to the goal 3. All students are confident learners who are increasingly self-directed, skilled, and persistent as learners. We know that this can only be accomplished if our students are safe and feel connected to their school environment. We're looking at the vision and measurable objectives as we prepare to do the work that we're doing. We succeed when all our students and graduates are acting out of a strong sense of personal, social, and civic responsibility. How will this vision be measured? All students will improve in their confidence, self-direction, and persistence as learners. Number 2, specifically, all students will report that they are physically and emotionally safe in Parkway, which is the priority of this action team. And 3, all students will monitor and make adjustments to achieve their personal goals, including academic, health, social, and civic goals. Our charge, focus, and priority deal directly with measurable objective 2. All students will report that they are physically and emotionally safe in Parkway. Project Parkway's teams that have been addressing this issue are as follows. The School Climate and Bullying Task Force, the first one that got started, was in August 2010 and went through November of 2010. The district staff and community members made up 40 members. They studied the climate and bullying and developed recommendations for improvement. The Social Emotional team was initiated in September 2011 and is still ongoing. The district staff that makes up that particular team are administrators, counselors, social workers, and other stakeholders. They are to develop action plans to address Goal 3, Measurable Objective 2, and School Climate and Bullying Task Force recommendations. Project Parkway School Climate Advisory, which we're working with now, initiated September 2011 and is ongoing. They made up of district staff and the community members, including students. We have students on that committee. Communicate with and attain feedback from the advisory related to the work or the direction of the Social Emotional Action Team. The key areas that they addressed. The School Climate and Bullying Task Force addressed 5 key areas. And since we were focusing mainly on bullying, it was imperative to figure out an agreed upon definition of bullying and clarify who's doing the bullying, what kinds of bullying, and where is it happening. An essential component to address this issue is to gather data on bullying and to explore the school improvement process. Another key area addressed by this task force was looking at best practices and standards of behavior. Looking at what policies and guidelines already exist in Parkway, as well as what's missing, are key to maintaining this initiative once it's in place. When initial intervention fails, what infrastructure supports are in place to ensure students are successful? The members of the School Climate and Bullying Task Force divided into 5 subcommittees to address each of the key areas of concern. The first subcommittee defined bullying and its parameters. They were to review current and potential data related to bullying. Subcommittee 2 conduct inventory of bullying climate data currently available, make recommendations for district-wide ongoing monitoring and improvements. The third subcommittee was to identify existing programs and practices to improve school climate and reduce bullying. Review what Parkway has related to social emotional expectations and standards and behavior. The fourth subcommittee was to identify and assess Parkway's policies and guidelines related to school climate and bullying in the context of state and national standards. And then the last subcommittee, Subcommittee 5, that committee was to review the effectiveness of existing efforts to help students who do not respond to initial interventions. This task force worked extremely hard to give us recommendations that are essential to making sure our Parkway students are safe. The following recommendations will be prioritized by the members of the action team. Many of the items are currently in action, while others have been combined into one action. It is the consensus of the action team, however, that a framework of social, emotional, behavioral standards are needed for these recommendations to be properly aligned, implemented consistently, and sustainable over time throughout the district. Dr. Steve Colombo will be discussing this in more detail. The Social Emotional Task Force developed an age-appropriate, agreed-upon definition of bullying and common language about bullying in order to implement the survey on bullying to students in grades 3 through 12. It is important to develop a consistent practice across the district for sustainability. Staff, students, and stakeholders will be trained on the topic as well. For students to feel safe, methods for students to report bullying are crucial. This is already being done in many of our schools. A best practices website for Inside Parkway will allow students also to see what others are doing and implement. Individual schools will create climate goals and identify and train school climate teams at each building. There are several policies in Parkway that either overlap or exclude some key elements about student safety. These policies will be reviewed, combined if necessary, and created if they do not exist. The bully survey has been given to students in grades 3 through 12. Dr. Colombo will also address that information. But the key recommendation on this slide for me is to study the correlation between students not feeling safe and their attendance, discipline, number of visits to counselors, and also to nurses. If students do not feel safe, it will affect their social, emotional, physical, and academic well-being. I guess being a licensed professional counselor, I really don't think kids can do well academically if they are not emotionally well. The recommendation to create a framework for bullying intervention by using the data results from the bully survey, for example, how often, where, and what kind of bullying, and the time of day that it happens, and when the framework for bullying intervention has been created. It is imperative that the district establishes, lost my place again, sorry. That it is imperative that the district establishes responsibilities for implementation, follow-up, and communication at the school and district levels. This will ensure all students feel safe. Now I'm going to turn it over to, although the Social Emotional Action Team has been working extremely hard, we have a lot of work to do. This action team is committed to making sure our students have everything they need to be successful. Therefore, the members The membership is extremely diverse. We have administrators on the social emotional action team. We have counselors from all levels, elementary, middle, and high. We have district social workers and counselors, staff from special services, staff from the Teaching, Learning, and Accountability Department, technology staff, health services, early childhood staff, special education, and other staff as needed. Our primary directive from you, the Board of Education, was to address the bullying and to fix it. Now, Steve Colombo will continue with the bully survey and the themes and what's next for the social emotional action team.
Because bullying was identified as a high priority by Project Parkway, the community, and all that, and we were told that that was the thing that needed to be fixed initially, that became the first activity for the social emotional action team. So we worked closely with them. We looked at other bully surveys that have been out there. We used the social emotional advisory and so forth, and finally came up with a bullying survey that had the following themes to them. Looking at the types of bullying, the frequency, who did it, where did and how did it occur, why do you think you were bullied, how do you think you or others responded to the bullying, and how did you bully or observe others being, did you bully or observe others being bullied? So those were the themes. We did go to other groups and work with them on this. We created two versions of the survey. There was an elementary one and a secondary one. All surveys were done electronically. We used a lot of the school level people to develop scripts that they would use to introduce the survey to students, and there were 3 different scripts so that we could kind of be more confident that the students knew really what we were asking and why. And then we administered most of the surveys between January 6th and the 20th. And a couple of glitches occurred, and we just got back some surveys from one of our high schools, and the other one is in the process of doing surveys right now. But based on what we've got right now, and this is without the current, well, let me update this information. I updated it at my computer, but not here. The percentages now actually, if you look up there, the elementary, 85.8% of all 3rd and 5th graders, 3rd through 5th graders rather, completed the survey. In the middle schools, the percentage has stayed the same, 79.5%, and our high schools are now up to 35.6%, and we have one last high school to finish the surveys. So we really feel that the large number of responses are going to give us a great deal of reliability and allow us to look at the validity of items and so forth. So we're looking at this as a baseline for subsequent surveys and use this to evaluate our interventions in the future. We anticipate and hope that we can do pre and post surveys in future school years. So we have very, very large numbers out there. And then we're going to be taking things back to the action team to start looking at the data. With respect to other aspects of what our team is up to, we're going to begin new work on looking at existing programs and practices to improve school climate and reduce bullying, and then also take a close look at what Parkway has related to social emotional expectations and standards, one of the big recommendations that came out of the task force. We're going to continue reviewing existing school-based strategies and interventions for bullying. There's a lot of things going on out there. A lot of schools are doing very good things, but they're not as integrated and systemic over the district as we think they might need to be. We're also working on continuing expanding our community-based supports, working with the National Council of Alcohol and Drug Abuse, Preferred Family Health Care, and School Climate Advisory. One thing that is really exciting, and we don't list up there, is the sales tax that St. Louis County passed several years ago that generates money for children's mental health. There's a lot of agencies submitting grants and getting funding, and a lot of them are interested in working with Parkway. So we've got a lot of resources coming into the district, and we see our action team as being kind of the central clearinghouse and a place to work with those people. And the last thing we're going to be doing is making sure that we work collaboratively with the other action teams, particularly DAD, PMI, Special Ed, and TLA, because obviously all this work overlaps each other. We want to make sure we're not doing things in isolation. So following up on one of the recommendations was to take a look at what does Parkway have in social emotional expectations and standards of behaviors. And essentially what we found is we have some, but there's nothing that's systemic, comprehensive, or developmental. We have discipline standards. They're kind of, in our discipline policy, they're worded in a negative direction. We have codes of conduct for elementary and secondary, but they're not necessarily developmentally sequenced or systematic. We have other policies and definitions, but those also are not interconnected to one another. And all of what we have all predate the CSEP and strategic plan, so they may or may not be aligned with our mission and vision. So we've got a lot of work to do. One of the good things that we found, and some of us who have been in the field for a while and been looking at some of these things, are very excited about the opportunities that are presented now. There is a Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASEL, and it's based in Chicago, affiliated with the University of Chicago, and it's a very significant resource for social emotional learning standards and strategies. Illinois has collaborated with CASEL and other organizations and have developed a very comprehensive approach to social emotional learning. They have standards that are extremely detailed, and we're going to use those as a guide. We've already presented them once to our action team, and are going to start looking at those as a basis for ours, but are going to do it in the context of Parkway and the state of Missouri and what is expected here. Social emotional learning ultimately means it's a process of acquiring the skills, knowledge, attitudes to recognize and manage emotions, demonstrate care and concerns for others, establish positive relationships, make responsible decisions, and handle challenging situations effectively. Sounds a lot like our mission and our vision. Developing these skills is a lifelong process and therefore relevant to pre-K through 12th grade and beyond. They have adopted 3 goals in Illinois. They're listed up there: self-awareness and self-management to achieve school success and life success, using social awareness and interpersonal skills to establish and maintain positive relationships, and demonstrating decision-making skills and responsible behaviors in personal, school, and community context. So those are the major goals that they have, but they didn't stop there. They have developed a lot of standards that go along with the goals. These are specific statements of the knowledge and skills within a goal that students should be able to know and be able to do and should know. They have benchmarks that are learning targets that are much more specific than the standards, and they're broken into early elementary, K through 3rd grade, late elementary, 4th through 5th grade, middle or junior high, 6th through 8, early high school, 9 through 10, and late high school, 11 through 12. They then also have developed performance descriptors, which are very, very specific learning targets that can be used to look at, designed to help educators select and design curricula, classroom activities, instruction, performance-based and other assessments that are aligned with the standards. So they've done an incredible amount of work, and we don't see much need to reinvent the wheel, but obviously want to make sure that it fits what we're doing. One of the key concepts of social emotional learning is that students acquire SEL skills through explicit interactive instruction. They need to practice it and get feedback on it. They need to have adults and peers model it for them. It needs reflection, and it needs to have application and generalization. So this is, in effect, a curriculum, and it also gives us standards by which to judge when students are progressing as they should or not. So what we want to do is to ultimately fill out the right side of the intervention pyramid. What we need to do is to recognize that we've done a tremendous amount of work on the left side with curriculum and content academic areas, but behaviorally we're not anywhere near as systematic as we'd like to be. We also need to understand that these are interdependent concepts. Students who are more successful academically tend to behave better. Students who behave better tend to be more successful academically. So we want to make sure that we have a clearly outlined set of standards. We also need to know when students are not meeting those standards so that they can move into supplemental interventions in a second tier or even in a third tier for students who need very intensive work. So what we need to do is, in effect, take and build this process, but we're going to be using the Illinois standards and concepts and philosophies to do that. So once we have some of these things, then we will start looking more at how do we support these things, how do we teach these things, how do we measure them, much like we do, we're talking about common assessments and progress monitoring. We do the same for social, emotional, behavioral areas. And ultimately, the research says that if you really want to change your school climate, you have to approach it in a systemic way, you have to teach it intentionally, you have to model it, and you have to give students feedback and interventions when they need it. So that's where our action team hopes to go. We realize this is a pretty big effort. We realize that it's going to take time, but without taking it systematically and building it from the ground up, we really don't believe we're going to get the district-wide climate change that we want, and we also want to make sure that what we do is sustainable. So with that, I'll see if you have any questions either for Charlotte or myself.
Thank you, Steve. I think every member of the board feels passionately about this. It makes us sick when we hear, it comes to our attention, some of the incidents that have happened to even some of our students in Parkway. Some of them maybe not so serious, but to that kid it feels pretty bad, and that's why we've given you that directive that we really want to do everything we can to make sure this is fixed. We just want our kids to come here and feel that I can come here and learn. I don't have to worry about that extraneous stuff. And it seems like this bullying stuff, it continues to progress in ways that challenge us, the social media and things that we didn't have to worry about before because we just worried about the four walls here, and so much of what happens to them happens outside of these four walls. But I'll leave it to see if anybody else, go ahead, Helen.
I'm very passionate about this subject because I have been on the receiving end, both as a child from adults and as an adult from adults for being bullied. And I have several questions. I've been in the committee from Project Parkway on bullying and watching this grow. First of all, isn't there a deadline that's required either by the state or federal that we have a policy in place, and what is that deadline?
You mean a bullying policy?
Yes.
We do have a bullying policy in place. We got the deadline last year, year before last.
I have that, yeah,
but yeah, we do need to take a look at it. We need to look at all of the policies because they just sort of overlap.
Okay, so that policy is in place. So what we're looking at now is reviewing this?
Reviewing it, looking at all of the other policies that are in place, talking about character education and things like that, see where there's overlap. But we have to have, the state requirement is to have a bullying policy that stands alone.
Okay. So what is the deadline then? I mean, what is the date?
I don't have a deadline as of right now. I can let you know what it is, but we do plan, that's what the committee will be doing, is there is a group that will be working on policies. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm sure we're going to get it out and get it to the board soon, but I don't have one.
I think all the policies we're supposed to have are in place. I think the issue is making sure that they're interconnected, that they're consistent across there, that we've got, much like was mentioned earlier tonight, we want to make sure we've got consistent language from policy to policy and throughout the district. So I think we have all of the policies in place that we're required to have, but what we don't have, I don't think, is the infrastructure, so to speak, to start supporting those policies and making them, really be effective.
Okay, along with that, and I spoke with some parents last night about this whose child had an incident. Do we have the consequences of violations of this policy in place also? I don't, on all the information that was just given, I see the surveys and what we're going to do to implement and follow through. And my other question, one of them would be, well, then who are the main interventionists? And what are the consequences? We don't seem to be having any consequences for violations. And also, will this include cyberbullying as well?
It definitely will include cyberbullying. And also in our discipline policy, it does talk about bullying, and it talks about the consequences to that. So, yeah, the consequences are written in the policy, the discipline policy for bullying, and it does address that. It's also in the policy for bullying as well.
Okay, then going back to this conversation I had last night with a parent, apparently there was an incident, it was reported, but it took several days to address the problem, and I understand, you know, you have to investigate everything, all sides and everything like that, and then at the end, it was like, and again, I'm getting this from parents that, well, nothing seemed to have happened, there weren't any consequences.
Yeah. And I think it was at high school or elementary, because I'm sure they could answer.
Well, just in generalization, though, I can address that. So there's often times when parents don't know what the consequence or intervention was because we don't share that publicly with what had happened. But I know that we often get calls, or the school administrators will get a call. And sometimes it's tough because some of the best bullies are really good at it. And they're really good at disguising it, and they're really good at getting away with it. And so it does take time to investigate and look into it. But yeah, I think each and every incident is taken very seriously by our administrators and addressed. And the challenges have been greater. We've mentioned cyberbullying and different social media sites, and that's been real tough because sometimes it's happening 24/7. And it's not, you know, sometimes traditionally people would think of bullying kind of face-to-face or shoving or bumping in the hallway or making fun, and sometimes it's way beyond the one-on-one interaction that happens in the schools.
Are there any reports or anything written down? I mean, I'm sure it depends on the seriousness of what is happening at the time, but, and if so, how does Parkway's standing on this compare to a few other districts as far as frequency and how it's handled?
Well, I don't know. It's really, as far as comparing other school districts, depends on how they track incidents. So if you mean, I mean, we track all our consequences to a bullying incident. But right now, I think that's what the ideal of the survey is, to track the other kids' perception of it. So the only data tracking system we have in place is when a kid receives a detention, when there's an intervention in place, when there's peer mediation, when there's a suspension. So we would track it through our discipline data process. And I don't know if other schools would have as quality tracking to compare that to as we do right now.
Could I just, I think these are wonderful questions, but I also think that the survey plus the ongoing work of this group, you're going to look at a lot of things. You know, whether it's how we are developing expectations, how we're communicating with parents, how we're developing curriculum around expectations, how we're talking about adults and reinforcing. You talked about being bullied as an adult. Yeah, it starts there, I think. And so I think there's many aspects, including do we need to improve our reporting and discipline. So I think the survey, it will help in that way, but also just ongoing work and research in this area. And Steve talked about those many resources. So I think those are, you know, questions that I think will be further developed, or answers, I should say, further developed. Because right now I think we're being reactive. We want to be more proactive with
It's a matter of turning things around from a reactive perspective to a much more proactive, and starting to go to address bullying and related behaviors at their source when kids are very young, so it's not as much reaction at the high school level or at the middle school level.
We also have students in different buildings that are taking on the initiative. For instance, at Northeast Middle and at North High and a lot of the other schools, where the students are being the driving force to stop bullying, to have an anti-bullying zone. So it's a passion of mine as well, and I understand exactly what you're saying. It's we have got to get to the root of it, but it has to be something that is in place in the district in which everybody buys into, and it has to be done in a way in terms of one of the things that Steve talked about. So, but it is a passion.
Ultimately, the research, and it's people like Castle and others, who say that the best way to address bullying is really by changing the fundamental climate of the building. You change the culture in the schools so that kids themselves start recognizing what bullying is. When they see it, they talk to their peers, they tell them we don't do that here. So it's a matter of while reacting, while we're still trying to change how we do things. So bullying, I know for a fact, is taken very, very seriously in the district. But again, as Dr. Marty said, right now we're pretty much on the reactive end of things, but there are a tremendous number of things happening out in the schools that are very proactive. The schools have a lot of good things going on. It's just not a systematic approach. What we want to do is get to a point where we have standards of behaviors. We know which students are getting it, which students are not. We have programs and interventions to use when we identify those students. We also want to make sure that all the schools have some school-wide programs in place, things like Character Plus, things like school-wide positive behavior intervention supports, so that it's not just a haphazard approach to things, but that they've got school-wide programs on these things. But that's just going to take time for the district to move in that direction and build a culture that supports that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and the committee.
Mr. Major?
And I guess maybe the definition of bullying is still being massaged, but I think most of what I heard tonight and the last few minutes when you were talking sounded like we're mainly talking about student on student. I think cold hard reality is we've got adults who are bullies.
We recognize that.
And certainly
well, if you go back to one of the slides, it specifically say that the way you really become effective in social emotional learning, one of the factors is that adults and peers model appropriate behavior.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was on the radar.
It's on there.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll keep up with you on that. We appreciate it.
We're looking forward to coming back at a later date and having some progress to share.
I felt a little bullying lately. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. 13.0 work session, none. 14.0 policy review, there are none. 15.0 call for a special meeting, none. 16.0 call for executive session, February 25th and March 14th, 2012. May I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education call for an executive session, including any record or vote, on Saturday, February 25th, 2012 at 8 a.m.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Oh, you're supposed to read those.
Okay.
Remember? We jumped the gun, sorry.
All right, well, I will.
To stay legal.
All right, so I'm asking for a motion and a second, including any record or vote on Saturday, February 25th, 2012 at 8 a.m. for the purpose of preparations on behalf of the district or its representatives for negotiating with employee groups, including any discussion or work product, 610.021.9, and on Wednesday, March 14th, 2012 at 6:30 p.m. and or immediately following the regular meeting at Central Middle School for the purpose of considering 1, legal actions, causes of action, or litigation involving the district or any confidential or privileged communication between the district or its representatives and its attorneys, 610.021.1. 2, hiring, firing, disciplining, or promoting of particular employees by the district when personal information about the employee is discussed or recorded, 610.021.3. 3, preparations on behalf of the district or its representatives for negotiations with employee groups, including any discussion or work product, 610.021.9. 4, individually identifiable personnel records, performance ratings, and records pertaining to employees or applicants for employment, 610.021.13. Now I'll take a motion and a second.
Second.
Roll call, Ms. Calanda?
Mr. Applebaum?
Yes.
Mrs. Castillo?
Yes.
Mrs. Feldman? Yes. Mr. Major?
Yes.
Mrs. Mogerman?
Yes.
Mr. Jacob?
Yes.
I got the evil eye, that's why I know.
And finally, may I ask for a motion and second to adjourn the regular meeting?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0, and we will now adjourn to our executive closed session. Thank you very much, everybody.